Welcome to Book Nibbles, big ideas, small bites. When you think about government websites or online services, what's the first image that comes to mind? For most people, it's not something sleek or user-friendly like Amazon. Instead, it's probably a mental picture of frustration, pages that don't load, forms that crash halfway through, confusing instructions, or endless error messages that force you to start all over again. Jennifer Pahlka's Recoding America starts with that everyday reality, showing that these frustrations are more than just small annoyances. They're symptoms of a much bigger problem, a system where the way government is structured and the way technology is built for it are often completely at odds. Pahlka isn't just pointing fingers from the outside. She's lived inside this world, having worked with government agencies and founded organizations like Code for America. She saw firsthand how well-intentioned policy often crashes into reality during delivery. From her perspective, government tech failures aren't about lazy workers or uncaring bureaucrats. They're about structures, incentives, and cultures that make failure more likely than success, even for people who desperately want to do the right thing. At first glance, this might seem like a book about technology, and it is full of stories about websites and apps. But at its core, Recoding America is really about people and power. It's about how laws are written without accounting for how they'll be implemented, how rules pile up until systems become incomprehensible, and how government agencies contract out huge projects in ways that virtually guarantee bloated costs and disappointing results. Ultimately, this all shapes citizens' faith, or loss of faith, in democracy itself. Pahlka makes this vivid with countless high-stakes stories. We're not talking about minor website glitches. We're talking about systems that determine whether families can get food assistance, whether unemployed workers can pay rent, or whether veterans can access the care they've earned. When these systems don't work, it's not just inconvenient, it's life-altering. Think back to the COVID-19 pandemic. Millions of people suddenly needed unemployment benefits. State systems exploded under the demand and websites crashed. People who desperately needed money to survive were left waiting for weeks or months because the technology behind the programs couldn't keep up. For some, those delays meant missing rent, losing homes, or going hungry. Pahlka uses moments like this to underscore a simple but powerful point. The design of government systems is inseparable from the delivery of government itself. If people can't use a program, it might as well not exist. Yet, over and over again, we've created a split where policymakers draft elaborate legislation, lawyers write meticulous rules, and agencies churn out regulations. But nobody steps back to ask the most basic question: can ordinary people actually navigate this? The disconnect between what's on paper and what happens in real life runs through the entire book. Pahlka argues that policymakers often treat implementation like an afterthought, as if the details of how a law works will magically take care of themselves. But in the real world, those details are everything. A poorly designed form can derail an entire program, a confusing online process can exclude thousands of eligible people, and a glitch in a benefits system can mean families go hungry. The deeper issue isn't just clunky websites. As Pahlka sees it, it's complexity. Over time, layers of rules have been piled onto government programs. Each rule might have made sense on its own, often passed in response to a past problem or scandal. But taken together, they create systems so tangled that even experts struggle to understand them. Citizens are then left to untangle this mess on their own, and when they fail, they're often blamed for not filling out a form correctly instead of the system being held accountable for being incomprehensible in the first place. Here's where Pahlka's voice is refreshing. She doesn't slip into cynicism or just mock government incompetence. She respects the people inside these agencies who are often doing heroic work under impossible circumstances. But she is also clear-eyed about how the system, as designed, sets them up to fail. She brings up the famous example of healthcare.gov. You probably remember the headlines: websites that crashed, users unable to sign up, a public relations disaster. Pahlka wants us to see that this wasn't a one-off mistake. It was the natural outcome of how government contracts out huge projects, how requirements balloon, and how user experience is barely considered until it's too late. But the real brilliance of Recoding America is that it doesn't stop at horror stories. Pahlka also highlights bright spots, cases where government systems worked because the people building them were empowered to focus on users first. She describes how teams that take an iterative, human-centered approach can cut through the noise and build tools that make a real difference in people's lives. This contrast between failure and success, between bureaucracy and user-centered design, runs through the book and leaves us with a question. If we know what works, why does government keep defaulting to what doesn't? That's the puzzle Pahlka spends the rest of the book unraveling. She digs into the habits of policymaking, the legal frameworks, the contracting processes, and the cultural norms that have created this status quo, making us reflect on what we really expect from government in the digital age. The breakdown in government technology, Pahlka emphasizes, isn't really about the technology itself. Outdated code and clunky websites are just the visible symptoms. The deeper issue is how government defines its mission, writes its rules, and structures its projects in ways that make failure almost inevitable. Take unemployment insurance, for example. You'd think that in a wealthy country, when people lose their jobs, the system would be set up to help them quickly. But what happens in reality? During the COVID-19 pandemic, the failures became almost absurd. Millions of Americans entitled to benefits simply couldn't get them. They spent weeks refreshing websites, calling jammed phone lines, or filling out confusing forms, only to hit errors. These systems didn't fail because people in government didn't care. They failed because the way programs are designed practically guaranteed that the technology would lag decades behind. Policymakers wrote laws that piled on complexity, new eligibility categories, exceptions, reporting requirements, without ever thinking about how those layers would play out for the people on the other side of the screen. When those rules get translated into software, the more complicated the policy, the more brittle the code becomes. By the time the program launches, it's basically a giant maze. So when demand spikes, the system doesn't bend, it breaks. Pahlka's point is that this isn't just a tech failure, it's a policy failure disguised as a tech one. If Congress writes a law that makes it nearly impossible for people to qualify, the website that enforces that law will naturally look broken. But the website is just the messenger. What's easy to miss is the sheer human cost of these failures. It's not abstract. It's families going without rent money, veterans waiting months or years for benefits they earned, and small business owners losing opportunities because a government loan application was too confusing to complete on time. One story Pahlka highlights is particularly haunting. A woman who had worked her entire life applied for unemployment, but the website kept flagging her application for fraud detection. She spent weeks trying to prove she was who she said she was, faxing documents and navigating glitchy forms. At one point, she broke down crying because, as she put it, the system treats me like a criminal for needing help. The system designed to help people instead treats them with suspicion. It's because lawmakers were so worried about fraud that they tilted the balance away from trust and toward enforcement at all costs. The irony is that fraudsters often get through anyway, while honest people get stuck. Another big theme in Recoding America is what Pahlka calls the paperwork layer. Every time a policy gets debated, it often ends with lawmakers adding a new requirement. On paper, it sounds harmless, but in practice, every little requirement adds friction. It's like barnacles accumulating on a ship's hull. One or two don't matter, but over decades, the whole ship slows to a crawl. Think about the FAFSA form for college financial aid. It used to be over 100 questions long, and millions of students who qualified for aid never even applied because the form had become too complicated. This is a recurring theme. Every added document and every extra step, while meant to ensure accountability, collectively creates an invisible wall that keeps people from accessing services. Then there's procurement, the way government buys technology. Pahlka dives deep into this, and it's eye-opening. In most agencies, procurement rules are designed less for success and more for covering your back. Officials are terrified of making a bad buy, so the rules encourage them to choose big contractors who can write dazzling proposals. The problem is, those contractors don't actually have to deliver a usable product right away. They can win multi-million-dollar bids on the promise of building a giant system. By the time the government realizes the system doesn't work, it's often too late and too expensive to change course. But here's the hopeful part. When government does it differently, even small teams can deliver miracles. Pahlka's favorite story is the fix team that came in after healthcare.gov's disastrous launch. Instead of writing long reports, they sat down with the code, tested it with real users, and fixed problems one by one. Within weeks, the site stabilized. That model, small, empowered teams working iteratively, is what Pahlka believes government needs more of. It's not glamorous or about flashy innovation. It's about putting real users at the center and giving technologists a seat at the policy table from day one. Pahlka doesn't want readers to leave the book feeling hopeless. Her focus isn't just on diagnosing the problem, it's on showing how government can be recoded to work for people. The key insight is that it isn't primarily about hiring better coders or buying flashier software. It's about changing the culture of government itself. What does that mean? It means shifting how government measures success. Right now, success is usually defined by compliance, legality, or procedural completion. But from the citizen's perspective, that doesn't matter one bit. People care whether the system works. Pahlka argues that to recode government, we need a shift in incentives. Agencies and public servants should be rewarded not for checking boxes, but for delivering outcomes that genuinely help people. One of the most recurring themes is user-centered design. Pahlka demonstrates that it's essential in government. She tells the story of Code for America's work in California on food assistance programs. The old system was a nightmare, but by applying user-centered design, the team simplified the forms, made the application mobile-friendly, and provided clear guidance. The result? Participation went up, and the government achieved its goals more efficiently. Another cultural barrier is the siloed nature of government. Pahlka argues that Recoding America means tearing down these silos. It means creating pathways for systems to talk to each other and for teams to collaborate on shared goals. When agencies can coordinate effectively, government becomes less about bureaucracy and more about solving problems. The book shows that government doesn't need huge, expensive overhauls to make a difference. Small, empowered teams can create significant improvements. The healthcare.gov tech surge illustrates a core principle. Speed, iteration, and empathy matter more than perfection on day one. Government systems don't have to be flawless immediately. They need to be usable and adaptable. A major barrier to change is the way accountability works. Public servants are often evaluated based on avoiding mistakes, which creates a culture of risk aversion. Pahlka argues for a different model, one where employees are empowered to experiment and take measured risks, and where success is measured by how well the system works for citizens. This shift requires trust from leadership and the courage to tolerate occasional mistakes in pursuit of greater efficiency and fairness. Pahlka champions the role of civic technologists, people who combine technical skill with a commitment to public service. They bridge the gap between policy and implementation, understanding the limitations of legacy systems, the needs of users, and the importance of iterative testing. When properly supported, they can turn broken programs into functional, humane services. Ultimately, Recoding America is about more than technology or policy. It's about trust. Citizens' trust in government depends on it delivering on its promises. When systems fail, people lose faith not just in specific programs, but in the institutions themselves. Pahlka stresses that this is a danger to democracy. By contrast, when government works well, even in small, tangible ways, trust is reinforced. A simple, working benefits portal or a smooth application process can build enormous goodwill and confidence. The book is a civic project. It's about rebuilding the relationship between citizens and government, one usable service at a time. Pahlka's insistence is that transformation doesn't require utopia. Every simplified form, mobile friendly application, and redesigned workflow counts. They reduce friction, empower citizens, and make systems more humane. And when people see these improvements, they start to believe government can work. That belief fuels momentum for further change. Her vision is a government that works for its people in practice, not just in theory. One that uses technology as a tool to empower citizens where policy and implementation are aligned, outcomes matter more than compliance, and human experience drives decision-making. Central to this vision is empathy. Behind every form is a person with real needs. Empathy should shape how government operates by anticipating human behavior, asking what people will struggle with, and involving citizens in the design process. Pahlka shares multiple examples where a human-centered, iterative approach turned chaos into function, from California's food assistance program to city-level emergency response systems. These wins show that progress doesn't require rewriting every law. Sometimes it's about removing barriers and clarifying processes. Pahlka is optimistic about the role of civic technologists who act as force multipliers. Teams like the U.S. Digital Service and Code for America don't just fix broken websites, they help reshape processes and bridge the gap between policy and implementation. What's important is that these teams work alongside government employees. The combination of institutional knowledge and technical expertise is what makes real, sustainable change possible. As the book draws to a close, Pahlka doesn't just want readers to understand the problems, she wants them to act. Recoding America is a call to action. She challenges citizens, technologists, and policymakers to rethink the way government works. For citizens, she encourages engagement, empathy, and advocacy. For technologists, she urges participation in civic projects. For policymakers, her message is clear. Focus on outcomes, not just compliance. Prioritize usability and human experience. Empower small, agile teams. Reward innovation. And remember that government exists to serve people, not the other way around. The implications of Pahlka's argument go beyond technology. Recoding America is really about the relationship between citizens and government. When systems fail, trust erodes. When systems work, trust grows. And trust is the lifeblood of democracy. By focusing on human-centered design, iterative improvement, and systemic reform, government can become a responsive, effective, and humane institution. That, ultimately, is what Pahlka envisions. A recoded America where citizens are empowered, systems are functional, and technology serves as a bridge, not a barrier, between the public and the government that exists to support them. Reading Recoding America is both sobering and inspiring. Sobering because it reveals how far many systems have fallen behind and how often ordinary citizens bear the cost. Inspiring because it also shows what's possible when people approach government with empathy, creativity, and a willingness to iterate. The stories of broken unemployment systems are stark, but the stories of successful redesigns, empowered civic technologists, and small teams driving big change offer hope. The message is clear. Government doesn't have to be slow, frustrating, or inaccessible. With the right mindset, incentives, and culture, it can be agile, user-centered, and effective. Pahlka leaves readers with a challenge. Imagine government as a platform that works for its people, not against them. Imagine a world where applying for benefits or accessing services is simple, clear, and supportive. Imagine public service powered by empathy, data, and collaboration. That's the vision of a recoded America, a vision that is ambitious, achievable, and worth striving for. And that's it. Recoding America by Jennifer Pahlka. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.